Hey, welcome back to the Bus Hub. In this video, we're going to do a deep dive into how bus sounds are handled in OMSI in the bus. Sound is one of the most discussed aspects when people talk about the bus, and it's often compared to OMSI. And I think we can all agree on that. Right now, OMSI has superior sounds to the bus, which is why I do not want to make a simple comparison in this video, but rather answer the question, what exactly makes OMSI's sound design so strong? And where is the bus still lacking? And how exactly do those games have sounds implemented? For this, I picked two buses in both games, the MAN DD and the Scania Citywide. Of course, especially in OMSI, quality can vary a lot depending on who made the add-on. But the goal here isn't to rate specific bus mods, it's to see what the game engine itself offers modders in terms of possibilities and systems. Also, just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a sound design expert, just a curious bus nerd who dug into the files and editor as best as I could. In OMSI, it was easy to read the configuration files. In the bus, I had to rely on what I could see in their Unreal Editor blueprint graphs. If I got something wrong, please let me know in the comments. Alright, let's start with the engine startup. What are we looking for here? Well, in a real bus there's usually a little sequence. Chimes, pre-ignition, the starter cranking, then the engine starting. So let's have a listen. OMSI does a really good job here. In the configuration files, you can see they split this up. There's a starter sound, a transition loop, and an ignition sound. The timing is carefully triggered, so it feels like you're actually turning the key and going through multiple stages. The bus also has this split in its sound blueprint. From the Unreal Editor, I could see separate start and stop sound assets wired up, with fade times and factors for inside versus outside. In-game, you do hear the chimes and a short stage sequence. It's just simpler. There are fewer details before the engine truly kicks over. So both games handle it very similarly. It's up to the bus model creator to add the necessary details. Both games offer the proper tools for that. Now let's talk about idling. This shouldn't be too complex. What matters here is having a believable engine loop, maybe with some little additional details. Let's listen to this. Both did a solid job here. The main difference is really the different sound recordings for each game. According to the game files, both OMSI and the bus let you specify separate idle loops for inside and outside, which then are getting looped. OMSI's idle feels a bit more realistic and balanced. The bus can do it technically, it just seems like the recordings or mixing could use more love. But both basically use the same approach here. Let's talk about the big one, acceleration. Acceleration sounds are where the whole illusion comes together, or falls apart. Let's have a listen first. The key concept here is RPM layering. Instead of just playing one sample faster, OMSI splits the RPM range into multiple zones with separate samples. For example, the OMSI configuration file I checked had 4 or 5 interior engine samples, each with their own curves for throttle input. That allows for smooth crossfades, subtle changes in timbre, and especially for modeling transmission behavior. The bus actually has a pretty similar system in its Unreal blueprint. You can see it taking RPM input, pitch, volume multipliers, and even crossfading between arrays of samples. But when I looked at the assets, there were simply fewer samples. In my recordings, you can really hear this difference. The bus has RPM-driven pitch, but it often just repitches the same sample. On gear shift, it sort of jumps abruptly instead of crossfading between different layers. Meanwhile, in OMSI, it all sounded very smooth and properly layered. What that means is that the engine sounds of the bus could be as detailed as in OMSI, but TML simply doesn't have that many sound samples available. Also, what adds to the immersion is that OMSI also simulates the ZF and Voith gearbox, and you get that lovely, turbine-like whine that builds and shifts naturally. The bus doesn't simulate that correctly yet. Let's move to cruising. Let's listen to the test footage first. Here, you want engine sounds to respond subtly to throttle changes. In OMSI, the configuration file defines separate onload and offload samples for maintaining speed or coasting, and there are smooth transitions between them, plus extra details like rolling noise or subtle rattles. The bus actually also handles that very similarly. The onload and offload samples exist as well. The volume and pitch curves exist. But in practice, when I was driving, the transition between these states was very abrupt. It really felt like it was just toggling two samples without any smoothing. The bus also had some rattling noises, but they sounded a bit random and didn't really react to the road surface or driving style.
Now, slowing down is interesting. Let's listen to that. Very important here for realism, for diesel buses with Voith or ZF gearboxes, the retarder should kick in with a distinctive whine. OMSI simulates that with dedicated retarder sound loops, with their own RPM triggers and fade curves. In the configuration file, you can see multiple retarder sounds layered by RPM range. There are also samples for retarder start sounds for different RPMs. In the test footage, the bus didn't have any audible retarder sounds, but surprisingly actually has retarder sound assets in its files. There are both a single retarder sound and a looped version, but in-game, they're not currently audible or hooked up properly. However, I do remember hearing them in very early versions of the game, but it seems they have removed them temporarily. That's honestly a big missed opportunity because that Voith retarder whine is one of the most immersive audio cues for bus driving. But I'm glad to see that for the bus, the possibility is at least there. Next, let's look if there are any air release sounds when we release different brakes. In my tests, only OMSI's Scania Citywide had realistic brake release hissing sounds for the foot brake and stop brake. They were just small triggered one-shots, but they added so much atmosphere. But the important message here is that OMSI offers that functionality. The bus has sound assets for the parking brake release, which work fine. But for foot brake or stop brake releases, there were no extra sounds I could hear. Generally, the bus does not have any sounds for the air pressure system. This also definitely should be added in the future, because those air release hissing sounds really do make a difference for realism. Let's talk about hitting a curb. Let's listen to how that sounds. In OMSI, the impact triggers a clear rattling sound that really makes the bus feel physical. The bus also has curb impact sounds in its system, but in my test, it was just a soft thub that was barely noticeable. And there wasn't much chassis rattling or feedback, but I think it should be able to add that functionality pretty easily in the future.
Since you use them at each bus stop, the door sounds are pretty important too. Let's have a look. For doors, both games actually do a good job. The implementation is actually pretty simple, as it's just a triggered sound when opening or closing. Also, both games correctly increase the ambient world sound when doors are open, which is a nice touch. This is one area where they're really on par. Here, the only difference is the quality of the sound recordings. Finally, for things like buttons, switches, AC fans, both OMSI and the bus handle these with simple triggered sounds. The difference is mostly about recording quality and quantity, so those can get added very easily by bus mod creators. The outcome really just depends on the effort of the creator. So let's wrap it up. What did we learn? OMSI's sound system is very impressive. It's built on a very transparent, modular approach with lots of separate sound samples for different RPM bands, load states, and triggers. Modders can tune everything in a simple text file, but the bus actually has a surprisingly capable system under the hood as well. The Unreal blueprints I explored show it can handle RPM layering, load-based switching, inside-outside variations, and even retarder sounds. But there are fewer samples in the assets right now, some transitions aren't smoothed well, and some features like the retarder just aren't connected yet in-game. I actually think the bus has huge potential, especially with modding support coming. When bus modding becomes available and modders have the possibility to access those variables, the bus mods could end up sounding really well. The systems already are mostly in place. According to their Trello board, sound improvements are in their backlog. Let's hope they add more possibilities, better sample sets, and better tools for creators. What the bus really also needs is proper simulation of ZF and Voith gearboxes, which is going to make a huge difference. And here we go. I hope you have now a better understanding on how the sounds of these games work. If you have corrections, suggestions, or want to share your own experiences with sound modding in these games, please drop a comment. Alright, see you in the next one.